Yes, we come again to address our people concerning the things that are happening and that are about to snap in the Nigeria that is wobbling. We've heard about and we've seen several video clips of the oil theft, in which more than half of Nigeria's production is being taken away by people who don't have to, receive the money into the treasuries. And just as the case was in the question of the security and the insecurity, in which terror was being orchestrated from the government house, traced all the way to the desk of Nigeria's commander-in-chief and president, Muhammadu Buhari, on behalf of his Fulani kinsmen who are flooding into Nigeria from the entire Sahel region, and launching, orchestrating a campaign of, ethnic cleansing against indigenous nationalities, indigenous peoples of Nigeria, to take their land and turn Nigeria into a Fulani country. So now we have seen something exactly as that terror situation, in which our military was struggling against an army that was being commanded by their own commander-in-chief. Oil is being stolen on the scale we have seen. I was in the oil industry, so I'm in a position to speak authoritatively on what happens between the production of crude, the export of crude, even the refining of crude. There are not many people left in NNPC or wherever, or even the producing companies that can sustain a 10 minutes discussion on national TV on the matter of how those things are done. And so we come today to inform us that oil responsibility for that oil theft that we are now watching as drama rests on the table of Nigeria's oil minister, with NNPC, whoever is managing NNPC, group managing director, and all the people who are involved. The documentation, all the documentation for how crude oil, because companies are appointed to lift crude, companies, all kinds of the documentations about who comes to take what begins and ends with the NNPC as supervised by the petroleum minister, and the president of Nigeria is the one who has an oversight function. He is the one to appoint these to the oil minister and the NNPC heads. It is the president of Nigeria that does that appointment and has charge and responsibility for supervising their performance of their roles and duties. And so if we now have a situation where our current president decided not to appoint any oil minister since 2015, so Muhammadu Buhari is Nigeria's petroleum minister. That same petroleum minister, who ought to be supervised by the president, is fused in one. The head of NNPC and whoever is in the team responsible for signing off on documentations are also the appointees of that president. And so you have a triangle of the president, the petroleum minister, and the management of NNPC in some kind of trinity. Is 3 in 1, with Buhari as the personification of the 3. And so one person applies, the same person approves, the same person oversees execution. And that's how the matter of documentation for all the oil that is taken, out of Nigeria's shores. Then we come to who is it that ought to stop them from the vessels. We're talking about not just ocean-going vessels, we're talking about tankers and super tankers. When you hear about super tanker, that can, the very large vessels that can take 3 million barrels of crude oil, from 1 million up is already big. Then 2 million, very big. Then 3 million barrels can't even come to dock in Apapa Wharf, because of the size. I'm sure you know the football field. The vessels we're talking about, in length, can be the length of 3 football fields in terms of goalpost to goalpost, where you run your 100-meter race, or 100 meters times 3. That vessel. So you can imagine a vessel that will take, in terms of its length, 3 football fields. That's about what it comes to. You can then imagine what the width should be or will be. And so the only other responsibility for manning the movement of vessels and crude will be the Navy. But there's also the Commander-in-Chief that has charge over the Navy and the Army. And so this president that is Minister for Petroleum and appointer of NNPC management is also Commander-in-Chief, overseeing how the Navy and the Army will do the work of watching our, the ingress and egress, that is income, coming in and leaving of vessels that carry crude. What are we saying? That it is only that Commander-in-Chief that is in a position to order the Navy or the Army or the other security agencies to stand down while those vessels come and go. Nobody else is in a position to ask the Navy to look away. And so we state authoritatively, in terms of looking for where the buck stops in this matter, we will state authoritatively that unless somebody is able to show us something to the contrary, it must be that petroleum minister, who happens to be the president also, and that commander-in-chief, who happens to be the president, that is responsible for, that is ultimately, there could be other smaller players, just small players, or other collaborators in the system. Of course, we know the producing companies, Shell, Egypt, Mobil, and the rest, could have some, some role they are playing in terms of pumping out products they know are not going to certain destinations. Let nobody deceive themselves. Because if the pipelines conveying the products, the crude, if there's any breach, it's just a matter of minutes before they get to know, because the pressure will drop. So Shell cannot say they do not know. Egypt cannot say they do not know that the products, the crude they are pumping out, is not getting to where it should be going. Because as the pressure drops, you can be sure that there's been a breach on the line, taking some of the product in other directions. So there could be a whole number of agencies and participants collaborating to make it happen. That we should be discussing 700,000 barrels of crude oil that is taken every day. At an average of $100 per barrel, we're talking about 700,000 times 100. You can see we're discussing something in excess of $200 million every single day. And so we allege most categorically that it is the president, the minister of Petroleum, and the management of NNPC that is now fused in one, that is responsible for all the documentation for those stolen quantities. We further allege that it is the commander-in-chief who ought to be overseeing how the Navy, because no vessel can enter Nigeria's territorial waters without clearance, especially vessels of that size. You can miss some kayak, some speedboat that is, that could just dash in one direction or the other, in and out, but not a vessel of the size of supertanker that will come all the way through, stop for loading in the appointed place. Then even the question of leaving Nigeria territorial waters, the same way they have to be cleared and licensed to come in, that same way they are cleared and licensed to leave. So how does that clearing happen in the circumstances of what we are discussing? That people don't know how those vessels come and go. That people don't know how pipelines, they say it's now 9 years plus. It cannot be 9 years. It could be. It has to be a lot longer than 9 years. It didn't start with Buhari for now. It's been there for a while. But if we look back to even let's say 10, 15 years. Only 2 days ago, or 3, I was watching on Rise TV where a former director of DSS was talking about, some incident in 2004 where the committee was set up to go and find out what was going on, and they went in there and he went to discuss with Tompolo, and Tompolo was asking him, whether that's Tompolo, worked for NNPC or for Shell or for Navy or for, Tompolo was in 2004 pointing them back to the superiors, because they write reports about how these things are happening. Those people who are supposed to act on those reports, whether they were in Shell or they were in NNPC or they were in the Navy or they were in the Army headquarters or they were in the presidency, never, did anything. 2004. So those who are talking about 9 years of pipeline should go and, look for another story to tell. It's just they are trying to, create another narrative. So what are we saying in all of this? The same way concerning the security and insecurity we have seen, in which terror, Fulani invaders, causing, all kinds of mayhem, killing, kidnapping, they call them bandits. The same way we traced responsibility for it to the desk of the Commander-in-Chief of Nigeria's Armed Forces, Muhammad Buhari. That same way we are tracing responsibility for this crude oil theft to that same table of President, Minister for Petroleum, appointer of NNPC management, and then Commander-in-Chief overseeing the Navy and the security forces that should should always be in a position to tell us which vessel comes and which vessel goes. So let us not monkey around. Let's not be insulting our sensibilities and embarrassing ourselves. We have, our associates are calling us from all over the world, more or less having a good laugh at the kind of suggestions. You saw the group managing director of NNPC going to the field to pretend as if he's surprised to hear that these kind of things are going on. Who do they think they are addressing? What do they think they are saying? In the 21st century that the whole world can see, all vessels all over the world, because of the IMO registration, all vessels can be seen by everybody everywhere. So it's not a matter, it's that story of NNPC, Kerry of NNPC, Group Managing Director, however they designate him. That story sounds like telling me today that Lufthansa aircraft that has to come with 300 passengers or load 300 passengers have been coming into your airport and ferrying away passengers, or British Airways, without anybody knowing how it happened for 9 years. That's, it sounds like a tale for the Marines. Because tell me that an aircraft will come and load passengers 300 in number and fly off. At times 2-3 times in one day. And nobody in that management of that airport knew that such was going on. Because the money for those tickets, the money made in that operation of coming to carry those 300 passengers have been going into the pocket of those who did not want to document, So the aircraft, the passenger, the money they pay, below radar. And Nigeria is going about borrowing money. So where does that money go? That's not the concern for the moment, but let us know for sure. Let us wait until somebody comes to tell a more sensible story. The reality is that oil theft, the coordination for that oil theft begins and ends on the desk of the President, Minister of Petroleum, and Commander-in-Chief that should have been the one making sure that the military, the Navy particularly, will not let vessels saunter in and saunter out, carrying 3 million barrels of crude oil like the one they saw in Equatorial Guinea the other day. Let this insult begin to stop, begin to end up, begin to wind down. And again, we have to say, it's surprising to us that Commander-in-Chief that has been responsible for the terror happening to Nigeria is not standing down from that office. It's surprising to us that President, who is also oil minister, in the face of what has come to the open now, is not standing down in that office of president, or even in that portfolio of oil minister, which he appropriated to himself. In subsequent broadcasts, we are going to go back to this map you see in the background and put all the actors in this sordid, in this grand larceny on this map, so we can see who in terms of the Buhari, the Kyari, and all the other people in between, whether they head the NNPC or they head the Navy or they head all the agencies that should have played one part or the other, who are not playing it. We're going to place them on this map so we can see clearly who from where is taking what from where, and maybe for what purpose. That theft is only a confirmation that the Nigeria defined by the current constitution we have has become a criminal enterprise, because it's that centralization of everything that made it possible. Anybody who is not discussing how we dismantle that centralization, how we take down that constitution to return control, return ownership, return responsibility and charge to the owners of the sovereignties that have been confiscated into Nigeria, anybody who is not a part of how that is happening already is a part of the problem. I think we can drop it there for now.